Chris. Obviously I'm not Ilse, but I will be introducing Ilse. So Ilse Wolfe, she's a property coach. She's an investor herself. She's got a fantastic story. You just have to bear with me, or I just have to switch the slides over on the computer. But ladies and gentlemen, please give her a big hand for, she's certainly more attractive than me and Chris. Young Ilse Wolfe, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you everybody. It's such a privilege to be invited to Dave and Chris's event. So yeah, absolutely love coming back down here. It's a couple of years since I was last here, and I do recognise quite a few faces actually, so thank you for coming along. Now, you've heard a lot of the macro view, a lot of regulatory change in the wake of the government change, which has actually been very informative even for myself, because probably much like you, I'm very much in the trenches, out in the market, looking at the deals, more on a micro view. So I'm hoping that you'll gain a lot of value tonight looking at a couple of case studies. If you don't know my backstory, I'll go through that shortly, but what I'd love to focus on tonight is giving you a couple of examples that will illustrate how you can make the most of cash flow as an investor right now. So I ran a poll through my social media bases over the last few days, found that there are 4 times as many investors looking for cash flow as their number one priority compared to those looking for capital growth or capital gains, which doesn't sound that surprising. What I then did was I wanted to delve into those looking for capital gains. What are the final minutiae or the details behind that? And they were, I feel like that was actually a luxury. A lot of the answers were around, I really want to form a deposit to go into my next property. So what I really want to focus on is the 80%, let's say, who are really focused on cash flow. Capital gains, I do personally feel, based on my investment journey, which is about 17 years. I've definitely gone through the peaks and troughs of that myself, and had to learn and loved all of the lessons I got along the way. And I have truly arrived at a point where I genuinely feel adding value with existing properties is the sweet spot of property investment, and especially now, trying to get the best of the conditions and work through to get to the other side is basically most investors' priority, as I see it. So just a little bit about me, if you weren't here a couple of years ago when I was last here. But I started as a part-time investor when I worked for a major bank. And I feel like a lot of us in the industry have originated from banks, because we see the light of far more successful people that are going from, succeeding more from, monthly paychecks, where I was at a bank and my monthly check would last about 3 weeks. And I was looking for a better solution. And I remember going home one day and I said to my mum, I think I was 22, and I said, look, I just can't get this paycheck to last the whole month. This is really hard. And she said, you have nothing to complain about. I've been working for 30 years. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't picture doing this for 30 years. So I remember at one stage having a business client at the bank I was at, and they showed me the light, and that's where I started my part-time investment journey. 200 plus renovations later. Can you hear me all fine? Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect, great. So that's within my own portfolio as well as my clients. Standalone properties, home and income conversions, lots of blocks of units as well as we move into these higher yielding aspirations, lots of renovations, and I don't really want to talk too much about my service, ironically. I'd like to focus on what you can achieve and really educate you tonight. But in terms of when I do support my clients, I have what I call power teams. So basically, there's my supply teams from property managers here, property brokers, great example, new markets that we're moving into, and then the team on the ground who are physically creating the value that we as investors get to benefit from, providing those from Whangarei right down to Dunedin. And there is so much opportunity for cash flow here. I hope you can take something from some of the examples tonight. I'll briefly talk about my journey. Started with $5,000. My portfolio is, my personal portfolio is around about 20 million now, actually just in discussing it with Chris, I realised I started with zero. I never really thought about this, but I went and found other money for the first 5,000. So technically, it's actually all been financed, and I'll go through that in a minute as well. Who listens to podcasts here, out of curiosity? Which ones? Property Academy?
Joe Rogan. No.
Joe Rogan. So I have some episodes that are very, not Joe Rogan's. I mean, that would be the paramount moment, I think. But a few podcasts there, so we'll be sure to link to those. I think we've got an email that will go out in the next couple of days, and I'll make sure that you can have a link through to some of the case studies as well. And I personally launched my own one called Rinse and Repeat with Ilse Wolfe as well. That is on Spotify and YouTube. Slightly different take where I interview international property investors, largely from the US and UK, to try and basically get innovative ideas for cash flow that can help us through this stage that we're in. And regular in the Property Investor magazine as well. A little bit about the investment life cycle I've had myself. So the photo on the very far left is actually in front of the house I grew up in, going all the way back to the beginning very briefly. This was a sort of an ex-state house in New Plymouth, which is where I'm from. Went to a DSAL 1 school, and actually, in terms of my upbringing, the household I lived in was fantastic, had everything I needed, but my parents were not investors, and my parents got sort of burnt on that house in 1987. So there was never any education in the household about property or investing, and in fact, I remember growing up with just a ton of stress and avoidance of the topic. The next photo is my second job. I sort of went to university, studied strategy, e-commerce. I went and worked for Microsoft for a while, and then went to a big red bank. And it was there that I was exposed to a lot of corporate clients, and it was just, you need one person to really show you that. I think you're already past that individually because you're here tonight. But that light bulb moment for me was truly where an accounting partner sat me down, and I had associated that all of my most successful clients either bought properties to fund their businesses or vice versa. The businesses were funding success into investment, and these were by far the most successful people. And I thought, here's my exit out of having my monthly paycheck at the bank last for 3 weeks and scrambling for that last week. Moving down to the bottom, then I moved into a bit of a DIY situation, and various stages of trying to learn the renovation process, largely being talked over whenever my dad and my boyfriend at the time would come to site because it didn't look like I was the person that could have owned. I learned a lot of hard lessons. The first couple of years I invested, which was while I was still at the bank, and did not do a great job. And that was over the years 2007 to 2009 in the global financial crisis, the GFC. So if you were investing back then, you would know that the 95% loans, which seem to be re-emerging, was actually how I started. I bought a home and income in Hamilton, which is where I left, and took off on my OE, and then kind of ignorance truly is bliss. I didn't realise at the time how much trouble I was in, but when I look back, I think if I knew then how I view finance now, I don't think I would have slept. But basically out of that first relationship, we had 2 home and income properties. 2010, there was negative equity, which you don't really hear about these days, but that is basically where a lot of new build investors are struggling right now. Chris probably sees this every day, where you've bought a property that is worth less than the debt. So even if you sell that property, you're still left with some debt that now has no income based against it, and you're still holding that debt and having to service that from your day-to-day life and work. So when I broke up in that relationship, we had more debt than the value of the 2 home and incomes we had. All we could do was split the debt in half and walk away. So that's sort of how that started. A few hard moments later like that, I moved into thinking, how do I chase cash flow? And after several other similar light bulb moments, realised that that is what pays the bills. Capital growth is what we want for wealth long term, but cash flow is what helps the monthly payments go around. And over time, I evolved a process which I'll go into that basically leads with cash flow, but from a value add point of view. And this is how you, in my mind, get the best of everything to make the most of accelerating portfolio growth. Now I'm a property coach full-time, which I love. I used to think that I was, consciously trying to build my portfolio, but now I'm loving having my investors build large portfolios much faster than I did. I added this slide in actually because in driving over here with Dave and Chris, I realised that the very first time I met Chris was in my sort of help me moment. So this is going back about 8 years, and this was was the low point of my personal property investment journey. And it was when I had gone full-time. I lost my mother unexpectedly in 2015 and decided from that day I would never work for someone else and rely on them putting cash in my account. So I thought, I'll work this out. I'll go and work full-time, buy properties, renovate, drag my brother in, drag my dad in, we'll leverage equity, we'll create this deposit, we'll move into another property. Sounds so simple. Well, I was a student of a coaching firm who sort of said to me, look, you just need to buy as central Auckland as possible with the money you can get. All you need is capital gains to be to be wealthy. And there was I'd never heard the word yield before. I'd never heard, I hadn't heard a concept of how rents should make that go around. Within 6 months, these are the 3 properties I bought. One in Remuera, the middle one in Ellerslie, and the third one actually is still my home in Greyland. But within 6 months, I bought about $3 million of properties. The 2 on the left, which were investment properties, were units, or they still are, they're not mine, thank God. They are units within a block, and they were cross-leased units. And the hardest lesson I learnt, and this is the day I do remember walking into Chris's office, was I had these 3, and the negative gearing on these 3 properties alone. I think at this point I had about 8 properties, but these 3 alone pulled me under. I had a 3-month-old baby, my first baby, and the 3 of these were negatively geared at $55,000 per annum. So that was interest only, and on top of the rents and all the OPEX, etc. going out. What I worked out was at the time my partner effectively was going to work 5 months out of the year so that we could top up. So we're standing still for 5 months of the year just so that we weren't defaulting. Chris sort of said, what are you doing? And that literally from me was the pivotal point where I moved into cash flow and purely about leading with gross yields, which is basically your annualized rent divided by, the way I use it, total debt. And when you're buying existing properties to add value to, I use a standardized assumption that it's, the whole property is debt. There might be whatever the split is, 30%, 35% deposit debt on one property, the rest on the other, and renovation debt. And on that total debt now, the minimum I will, think as the expected standard is 8% gross yield. Brief recap on strategies in descending order. So, if you have land, there's often no income from a rental, residential rental point of view. So that is by far the most difficult to cash flow, especially when the bank LVRs are lower, often 50%. From here, existing builds under the previous government, which we've talked a lot about tonight, that has made it incredibly difficult. I hope you see opportunities in what I'm about to show you if you have some existing builds that you have not renovated, because there are opportunities there. From there you have new builds, which from an interest deductibility point of view are more affordable than your typical existing build. However, that margin is diminishing now with the new rules. And the sweet spot, as I see it, truly is to renovate in a specific way when you find the right properties to cash flow hack, which is a trademark process I have. And based on the many properties that I've trialled and errored through to get to my now, I think it's about 32 properties, which is my current portfolio, have kept those that have genuinely worked to get over an 8% gross return on a standalone property basis. is to manipulate the dwelling when you find the right dwelling, so that you can add an internal bedroom. And the reason for that you'll see shortly. But if you buy a 3-bedroom rent and you get a buy a 3-bedroom property, get the 3-bedroom rent, you've bought an average property, right? But if you can buy that 3-bedroom property and manipulate that to get a higher cash flow return, that's effectively buying at discount in the sense that you can cheat the market on a return basis or a yield basis. So that's what I'm all about. All those burns in the past, that's what I've learned. But also the other benefit is that if you want wealth, and this is definitely a benefit through the value-add strategy, is to renovate so that you can use the data of recent sales, comparable sales, start to create a deposit. Now, when we only needed a 20% deposit, which is actually what it was when I first started renovating full-time, it was much easier to buy a standalone property, add enough value, add an internal bedroom to its existing footprint, add 35%, and even when you revalue it, you could get enough deposit out to go and buy and keep going on the same calibre and location. Far more difficult now with a higher deposit required. And the other thing that's unique to existing builds that you don't get from a new build, of course, is that with a new build, the developer has maximised completely the value for them, right? And if you have a new build, you are at the mercy, for lack of a better word, your neighbours who sell, that determines largely your value. Where the management rents go, that determines your rent as well. Existing builds give you the opportunity to have that second bite of the cherry where in future you may or may not develop, but having that value sitting there is a massive extra asset. It might even be the extra asset that you just sell on to someone who wants to develop in future, if that's not your appetite. As Chris said, the environment has been extremely, I won't actually dwell on this too long. I think you've heard a lot about the conditions, which is fantastic. I can't do it a better job of that. But how we add value under Wolfe Property Coaching. So this is where, with a standalone existing property, we are talking about a minimum 8% gross yield that we create. So that's assuming deposit debt plus purchase price debt and a renovation spend that might be 10 to 15% more on top, right? So having to get all of that debt to work really hard is a bigger effort when you're adding debt on top compared to a new build that might be 4.5% return. Home and income, so this is not a conversion, but it is where you have a dual situation. There's a main dwelling and then a minor dwelling. The process through cash flow hacking is we're trying to add an internal bedroom, and this isn't needed to the same extent that it is with a standalone to achieve its return, because having multiple dwellings on a single title of land makes sort of manipulation of the rents easier when you add value through renovation. Having more dwellings gives you more leverage. And this is supercharged when you get into a multi-income or multi-unit situation. So this is an entire block of units. If you have a higher debt capacity, sort of 800,000 plus, you can probably get a block of 4 or 5 locally, or thereabouts. And having, again, 3 or 4 dwellings on the same title gives you multiple opportunities to adjust market rent, add significant value, make the property more attractive. From a valuation point of view, you move into a totally different kettle of fish on the registered valuation side of things, which is largely driven more commercially based on the income. And ironically, the renovations are easier and the way to add value becomes easier. It's not proportionate to the number of dwellings. Visually, top left corner, standalone property. This is one of my ones in Mangadei I bought probably about 10 years ago. That's on a great return. I've actually added a sort of a sleep out with some of the additional building consent exemptions that have been brought through the last few years. And then moving down, home and income, dual incomes, a couple of examples of multis. Now, cash flow, as I mentioned, as you know, it massively impacts your lifestyle, negatively or positively. On the left is, actually both of these graphs are from the same property, and it's the case study I'm going to sort of show you through right now, which is a New Plymouth-based property where it's a standalone house. The left chart shows you if that property had been purchased and rented as is, what that cash flow would look like. hopefully it's clear to see, but the dollar sign shows you 0, neutrality. Every bar is a year from years 1 to 14, and that property only becomes slightly positively geared in year 15. So that's what the previous government sort of put you into if you have classic existing builds. And just to also be clear, where we achieve those 8% gross returns, those are in every regional centre around the country, apart from Auckland, Hamilton, Tauranga, Wellington, where the premium on land does change the dynamics. But this is how I help my clients achieve an 8% return in most key areas where we do have all people on ground and you can invest from all around the world. This is the same property after we have cash flow hacked it or added an internal bedroom. Oh, sorry, before I move on too quickly. Neutrality around years 2 to 3. So this is one property in 2 scenarios. I truly call it the sweet spot. So we're looking at complete cosmetic renovations along with adding that internal bedroom, 5-6 weeks generally, with teams that are reliable that will turn over many renovations for us in a single location, in many locations. We're adding value, we're leveraging our deposit. I used to call it the sunscreen effect, but actually it's so cold now I need another analogy. But basically, if you have, say you have a property that you buy and you don't add value to it, the market comes back, you literally lose the cash flow that you've been earning through your job, right? However, if you add value through a renovation, if the market comes back, you simply lose the value that you've added. It hasn't impacted your capital that you've been working to build up. So this is another benefit that I truly back the strategy for. You can move as quickly as every 3 months, depending on the lenders and who you're working with. And I don't like being told you have to choose a capital growth or yield property. So with the strategy, you get both. You're boosting the value, capital, and you are going into a property, as you'll see in the second example, working with amazing property managers who can see the journey with you when you go into this dilapidated product, much like Bridget and the property brokers team in Palmerston North, where they can go on this journey and see what you're going to create. They can help you manipulate a far better product than how it may present online. And then you do get the best of both. This is not to really go through, but more to show how quickly a renovation can be, how smooth it could be. You have your key power team, so your LBP, your lead builder, your key subs, so your electrician, your plumber, and most commonly then you have your plasterer, maybe painter. They could be 1 or 2 people. And really within 6 weeks, you should be able to complete. If you buy the right properties, you are able to buy, say, a 3-bedroom house, and it can be a 4-bedroom rental, which is what we have done in Palmerston North, within 5 or 6 weeks. The cost of the renovation, between keeping that as a cosmetic renovation versus adding the room, again, when you buy the right house, the difference is about $3,000 to $5,000 on that renovation. So why would you bother buying an existing property and keeping it as it is when you could find another one down the road where you can add another bedroom? I actually should have added a slide. If you go to the market rents under tenancy services, you can see not only are you going from median 3-bedroom rent to the upper quartile 3-bedroom rent from a cosmetic renovation, if for $3,000 more, there or thereabouts, you then jump up a whole rank or up the ladder to upper quartile, new build look or aesthetics inside, the difference in rent can be, rather than $20 to $30, jumps to $100 to $150, sometimes more. To leave all that money on the table over time is just a massive sacrifice, and it's just not worth it. So to supercharge rent returns, as I say, is not taking that cosmetic house and just cosmetically renovating it. That's the first graph. It's about buying that 3-bedroom house and converting it into a 4. This is a real example from New Plymouth recently, bought for $415,000. That was a 3-bedroom house. You can see the ranch slider down there, which is fine. You actually don't need a building consent to do that to an external wall, converting that from a garage. Here, it's really important that when you renovate, you're not just doing something because you think you can get higher rent, right? It has to be appropriate for what the expected rental product is as a tenant in that location and for who that likely tenant is. So that's where you need to lean on the expertise of property brokers to know, okay, who's my most likely tenant type? What's that dynamic or that family group or that demographic coming into the home? Your renovation needs to tailor to that. That's how you get the above average return. And ideally, you're partnering that with the fact that they're hopefully on Trade Me or wherever you're looking on rentals, there's a total lack of that type of, that spec. How many bedrooms, how many toilets. In this location, it's a very highly desirable suburb in New Plymouth, which is Vogeltown, very great schools, great public transport, a ton of GJ Gardner in that environment actually doing a lot of self-development. In this house, you'll see the French doors at the back. This is a classic example of if you have a 3-bedroom property where the dining room can be, I personally feel 7.5 to 8 square metres, legally needs to be 6, but that feels tiny. You can claim that if the residual living and kitchen space allows you to, without compromising space for the lounge and a dining area. In this case, my client actually found that there were a lot of illegal things and managed to negotiate down. So the purchase price is fantastic for what should normally be about a 550k location. Here's the original floor plan. If you look at this, who has an existing build that's like this? This is a classic template from the 60s, 70s. The most important 2 aspects is to qualify the internal bedroom that you want to add. Not only comes down to the layout, so this is the first one, this is a great layout, very common, but you also then just need the overall size, the dimensions of each of those spaces. I think about them as quadrants. You have a dining room and a kitchen and a lounge that should be half of that, so 2 quadrants. As long as the total square meterage makes sense, and your property managers, again, property brokers say, hey, turn this from a 3 to a 4, it doesn't compromise or sacrifice the rentability, then you're onto something. This is the post floor plan, as I mentioned. Bonus that bedroom actually has French doors and has its own patio, so that was actually lovely. In most cases, it's not like that. Some afters. It's a bright red oven, but it was functioning, so we kept it. Here's the results, okay? So 415,000. The rent, as it were, in its horrible state prior to, was $450 per week. By adding the room, and in this case we did add a second toilet, so that was about $1,000 consent plus the $1,000 odd for labour and materials. That's $260 per week additional rent by up-speccing, if you will. So we added a bedroom and we added a toilet, which was expected for that location. If we hadn't added that toilet, we would have been doing a disservice to how appealing this would have been for that location. 8% gross yield would have been 5. So when Chris is talking about serviceability and adding cash flow to strengthen, the core of the strategy is so that you take every purchase you acquire to put it on its strongest footing from a cash flow point of view, as well as add value that is going to give you a nudge towards your forming your deposit for the next one. The registered valuation came in at 670. So that's the other point of if you cosmetically renovate a property, you will add some value. If you add a bedroom, that property now compares to sales, a whole category. So the graph on the right, previously 14 years of negative gearing, same conditions, break even as year 2 or 3 based on the assumptions of rental growth and inflation and where we see interest rates. I know we've been, I'm probably going over time, so I'll briefly show you 2 examples, and then following what you'll receive after tonight, I can send out a couple of really thorough, really exciting, most recent case studies as well. Home and income is a great way to nudge the return even further, because again, when you have multiple incomes, you get a second nudge of that. This is a property broker's managed property, post-renovation, and we worked thoroughly with Dave's team in Palmerston North, so Bridget, who is the BDM there, it's now managed by Izzy. The property was in a really rundown state, and there were holes everywhere. It was absolutely awful, but this is where you see more opportunity. Obviously before and after. Just briefly on this one, I don't have floor plans. In this case, we didn't need to add the bedroom, and in fact, the team did such a great job that the 3-bedroom rent is only $20 below what would have been a 4-bedroom. And their opinion was actually that if we had tried to squeeze that in, we would have made the property very unattractive to who wanted to rent it. So in this case it was a cosmetic renovation, but because we had 2 dwellings we knew we could add a ton of appeal. So we increased the rent by about 50% by knowing what we wanted to achieve and by what rents would be achievable. 6.3 return jumped to 8.5, and that's where we aim for an 8.5 to 9%. So we've only completed a couple of home and incomes in Palmerston North, but the results are showing that we're in the right place for where the stage of the market is. And anyone into buying or own blocks of units, full blocks of units here? Yeah? Okay, perfect. This is my personal love. I'm moving more into this. I think when you see the yields and the returns possible, you can't unsee it. And it goes into a whole separate banking situation that if you do need advice, if you're looking at this, you definitely must talk to Chris, because the rates and the banking structure, the financial arrangement for this physical property, as many others, can make or break this being a deal from a cash flow point of view. So here we increased the rent by about 60%, and this was through an 8-week renovation through 4 one-bedroom units. Have examples, literally the numbers translate around many regional centres. It's a good example. These 4 are on 4 cross-lease titles, 4 of 4, but quite commonly you can see them as 4 on 1 title. So again, you need to be working with the right lenders, which is what, it's the ins and outs that a mortgage broker will know. So Chris and I are having a discussion around which banks are open to this kind of business right now. It's not all of them. 10% gross yield, no bedrooms added. We just knew using a methodology which is more of a commercial valuation based on the rents. These were at $250 per week and they ended up at $400 from a cosmetic lift. Really exciting is that, I guess what I wanted to just highlight here is that there are so many creative ways to get to these 8 or 8.5 or 10% gross returns depending on the property type. And it comes down to having an eye for looking for how you can challenge and manipulate that physical dwelling. This is a quick photo of showing it. Hopefully this is something you can apply straight away. There is a building consent exemption where if you wanted to add a cabin or a sleep out to an existing dwelling, so without plumbing, there are a couple of points that you must comply with, but you can add up to 30 square metres of livable space. In my mind, that's up to 3 bedrooms. I've never seen anyone do a 3, but I'd love to see one. This is 2 bedrooms. In this case study, this is up north in Whangarei. We bought a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, which was an owner-occupied house. He had double glazed it. It was massively spec'd, over-spec'd for where it was. We picked this up for $353,000 about a month ago. Our builders built an on-site 2-bedroom sleep out, even colour coordinated the colours of the cladding to the house. The house has gone from a 2-bed 1 to a 4-2, and we haven't needed a single consent, which is really, very unique, because when you add a bedroom and you add plumbing fixtures, you do need consent. So what we'll do is we'll send that out so you can see how we managed to do it correctly, but did not need that, and within 4 weeks. This has gone from a $450 per week rental appraisal to $650. This is one of my properties, one of my most exciting ones. I'm from New Plymouth. This is my first New Plymouth property. It is an ex-motel. I've converted from a 10 to an 11 rental unit. And the rent I increased through largely cosmetic renovation. However, added an 11th studio, using up a wasted space out the back, and increased the rent from 109 to 253. So if you're into the multi-space, this is one I'll attach as well. If you'd like a bit more information, we've covered that off. As I say, I've got a podcast called Rinse and Repeat on YouTube and Spotify, so please look that up. It's a monthly guest with basically international guests bringing fresh ideas. So medium-term rentals is the one we launched yesterday. I definitely encourage you to have a look if you're at all in the short-term rental or Airbnb space as well. And contact details. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Ilse. Now Tracy's going to come up. We've got a couple of our sponsors got to say a couple of words. Do you need me to get the microphone down a little bit lower for you, Tracy? And then we'll do a Q&A after that. Okay?
Obviously, we'd like to say a big thank you to our sponsors. Two of them are here tonight, which is great. So we've got Arvi from Hire Hubby and Gerard from Southland Electrical and Refrigeration. Unfortunately, Nathaniel from Healthy Homes New Zealand couldn't be here tonight, or Glenn from Rock, but they have obviously donated some prizes that we're going to give away soon, which is exciting. So Arvi, if you'd like to come up and say a few words about your business, it's great.
Hi, I'm representing Hire Hubby, and I'm a director of Invercargill branch. We normally provide the service of general maintenance, like from picture hanging to general like kitchen renovation or deck or full painting, like pretty much to satisfy the customers. We do everything to go bit extra step ahead. Like if your customer asks somebody to, right, this is the kitchen we want to do it, right, we go ahead to give other option to them, explain them if you do it better like this and less cost. The customers sometimes they make them think twice, so that way they have a bit other opportunities to decide what is the better option to save the cost and get the job done right. And not gonna take too much time. And what else we can do? We're doing like full roofing, inside painting, outside painting. Thank you very much for property brokers. We are doing all the maintenance mostly for them. And so far it is going good with property brokers. Thank you very much, Tracy and Ilse and the whole team member, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Arvi. Now I'd like to invite Gerard up from Southland Refrigeration Electrical.
Put that up again. David mentioned he liked rugby, so I thought he likes cricket, so I thought I'll just start with I like rugby. I'm from South Africa, but I won't get into that too much. I may have to be carried out by a few boys, so we'll leave that in the past then. So I'm the operations manager as well as director of Southland Electrical and Refrigeration. I moved to New Zealand in 2018, started as a sparky with the firm. After about 6 months with the firm, I decided to move into the refrigeration division to cover the management for that division, and we slowly just grew with our customers over time and so forth, starting into heat pump services, those kind of things. We also grew into the commercial sector, but the business was mainly founded back in the day for being dairy related services, more rural orientated. So in the off season, what do we sit with? We sit with sparkies, fridges in the workshops with limited work. So we decided in 2020 to diversify the company and move into more domestic commercial sectors. So in that time we also had a bit of a management change where the existing manager then basically sold his shares and he moved on to a new position at a different firm. I took over the management of the company, and with a strong focus on becoming one of the biggest electrical and refrigeration outfits within Invercargill. So at that stage we were 8 employees, we are now 17 employees, and we keep growing day by day. We do have the problem of finding tradies to support the workload, which makes it very difficult for us. So from an investor point of view, I'd just like to give you just a few minutes of what services can we help you with. We've helped Caleb in the past. We've worked with Brian from Al's Pizza, Murray at the back there. So there's a few of you that know us, that know our services. We currently do some work for property brokers as well. Thank you, team, for your support. So from anything, if we start electrical, you need electrical services done when there's renovations, new builds, existing houses that just needs a bit of an upgrade. We got 6 qualified sparkies, that includes myself, even though I'm more office bound these days. But from time to time I still do like to go and get involved with the team and just stay within the boundaries of my trade and stay within the knowledge. So we've also then grown into the domestic sector from the refrigeration point of view, more HVAC related, where from a commercial point, domestic, we have underfloor heating, we have hot water cylinders that heats through hot water heat pumps. That's from an energy saving point of view for you. We have solar systems that we are introducing. We are introducing ducted systems, ceiling cassette units from a heating point of view. So we're looking at a lot of different new technologies. We are working with companies in Christchurch, companies currently in Queenstown and in Dunedin, where we're putting all this knowledge together to see what's the best next thing we can offer to investors in properties to make sure that we stay within the new era we live in. So if there's anything you need, you should have a packet from us with a lot of goodies in there, explaining just a bit of what we can do for you and can't do, and so forth. With business cards, if you get in touch, then we can help you out with no obligation quotes. Thank you very much.
What you can see up on the screen here, we do, and you're wondering what this device is here. What we do are 360-degree walk-through, entry, exit inspections, and if necessary, we do routine inspections. What we're about is about full transparency. And this removes a lot of disputes. So you can walk through the property, you can see highlighted all the pictures, we can put notes down, whether it's damaged, the tenant gets a copy of the ticket to see if they agree with it, and it really does reduce disputes. So it's a great tool that we brought into our business roughly about 12 months ago. The property managers love it. I love it because I don't have to deal with so many complaints about, oh, this was like this when it came in or whatever. This just resolves everything. So that's one of the points of differences that we have in property brokers that we're very fortunate to have. The other thing I'm really fortunate to have, because it makes my job so much easier, is having a fantastic team of property managers, but also this young lady here, Tracy Aston, who has worked so hard in putting this night together. She's chased up all the tradies, she's been on the phones, she's hitting our marketing team in Palmerston North. She's done a fantastic job, so please, if you can give her a big hand for Tracy Aston. We're only sticking around for a drink, and the bar is open, much to our regional manager's his displeasure, because he's got the bill in the morning. Fill your boots, because he's a bit of a tight bastard, so let's make the most of it. And if you want to have a chat with us and ask a few questions, feel free, but thanks for coming along, and thanks for your support. Thank you.